Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to go over my experience after playing in solo self-found Ruthless mode for 30 days and over 250 hours played across 4 different characters. There are many things that I really enjoy about Ruthless and other things which I do not, which I plan to go over in full. There are timestamps for everything down in the video description, and I don't know how much value my opinions have, but I would like to see the Ruthless game mode improve to be an overall more enjoyable experience. So I put a lot of thought and effort into this, so hit the like button, and let's get to it. If you know nothing about Ruthless, there is now a Ruthless option you can choose on the character creation screen, similar to solo self-found or hardcore. Ruthless is described as a completely different game experience with extreme item scarcity, among other changes which you can read more about on the forums. These changes are very present from the start, as no support gems are given to the player in any way other than them dropping. Aura gems are drop only as well. Quest rewards that normally give support gems now may give you the choice of a magic item. There are changes to how items give currency shards when sold to vendors, as well as changes to the prices of the items the vendors sell. Jewelry, belts, and gems cannot be purchased from vendors. There is only access to skill gems offered as quest rewards, and there are no movement skills, which is something I will go over more thoroughly later. This all presents quite the challenge when it comes to progressing through the story of the game. For players who struggle with the amount of choices offered them, or even new players looking to dive into Path of Exile for the first time, I believe Ruthless is a much more simple and approachable experience. It is very apparent early on that monsters are dropping far fewer items, and I also should note that you cannot use normal Path of Exile loot filters. You can still create custom loot filters, but they cannot hide items. I was very eager to take on this challenge in SSF, as I was mostly excited at the idea that the gems I acquired could greatly shape what build or builds would be most effective to play. Ruthless mode satiated this desire fabulously, as I leveled a Deadeye using Siege Ballistas and Storm Rain Ballistas for single target, as I found a Ballista Totem support gem early on. The first usable support gems and jewelry you find while playing in Ruthless are super exciting. Hey, a Ballista Totem support? You've gotta be kidding me. No way. What? Storm Raid totems would be insane. I don't have socket for it, but okay, I gotta start leveling that. That's like the perfect support gem for this. Wow. Support gem number 2 is insanely useful. I made it to maps after 18 hours and 43 minutes of playing, and I did mess with Sanctum a lot along the way through the campaign. I was still wearing several magic items. I had a 4-linked Storm Rain totem, a 2-link Galvanic arrow, an ensnaring arrow, precision aura, stone golem, enduring cry, a portal gem, and sniper's mark. That's it. I didn't have other gems that were useful to me, or ways to get them, or support gems to go with them, let alone sockets to put them in. It was pretty apparent to me at this point that the aura gems were going to be what really shaped how my character would progress. I happened upon a Purity of Fire, and the next aura I got was Pride, which led me to my second character, a Corrupting Fever Void Sphere Reap Juggernaut, as I needed a character that could complete heists. A few days later, I had found a solid rare one-handed sword and a 5-linked unique chest from Heist that led to a one-handed elemental crit cyclone Slayer. Then, a few days later, I found and 5-linked a Cane of Unraveling unique item that influenced the creation of a Vaal Blight occultist. I love the unique feeling to the experience I had, being so shaped by not only the support gems I acquired, but also the aura gems. The scarcity of items also makes the decently rolled items so coveted as well. And there still is enough access to socket modifying currency to give you the chance to still make items usable. Though the idea of crafting an item is nearly non-existent in Ruthless mode, as if the goal of this mode was to make rare items that dropped on the ground feel very valuable. Ruthless does this very well. Alchemy orbs are rare, alteration orbs are extremely rare, and so are chaos orbs. Getting a useful 4-linked item can be as challenging as getting the gems to socket into it. There is no crafting bench in your hideout to top off elemental resistances or craft sockets, no re-rolling of items with harvest, essences and fossils must be used on white items, Rog's inventory is mostly filled with magic items, the only semblance of crafting comes from the timed Betrayal benches. This means that if you want an item, go kill a monster and get an item. Finding an item that upgrades your build is very exciting in Ruthless. Whereas in the normal game mode, there are so many rare items that they are essentially useless. In Ruthless, every single rare item that drops is worth its value in transmutation shards. This also makes item rarity much more valuable on your gear and makes the choices between damage, defense, and item acquisition rolled on your equipped items much more nuanced and interesting. The process in which you must create and gear a character in Ruthless is where the majority of my love for this game mode lies. There are still so many changes I have not yet mentioned, yet as I hope to have made it quite clear where I found the most enjoyment playing in Ruthless. In the end, I got what I wanted out of Ruthless. I felt forced into strange and interesting builds based upon the items and gems I was able to acquire. This will make any subsequent playthroughs in Ruthless as equally challenging and unique. However, after having spent a decent amount of time in maps across several different builds, the flaws in Ruthless started to reveal themselves. I will start with movement skills. Now, I went into Ruthless trying to embrace the game without movement skills. I enjoyed the early challenge of progressing through the axe and trying to make my way through Sanctum using no movement skills. However, the amount of grinding that is required in Ruthless makes any character that is not maximizing movement speed feel awful to play by comparison. I don't like feeling this way about the builds that I make. My Corrupting Fever Void Sphere Juggernaut is a cool, solid build, but my Cyclone Slayer gets a lot of movement speed by stacking frenzy charges and can clear maps literally 3 times as fast. Why would I ever want to play on my Juggernaut? Essentially, movement speed has far too much value, and in the base game, movement skills help to bridge this gap, making slower characters still feel solid to play. A movement skill on my slower character would have far more impact on its playability than it would on the faster character. Now, I have seen many suggest to add a 10-second cooldown to all movement skills or something as a counter to bringing them back. I disagree, as this will not solve the movement speed issue I am experiencing. In my opinion, movement skills should be drop-only gems restricted to maps, adding another set of chased gems that could define a new build in the same way that auras do in Ruthless. There are also several boss fights where having a movement skill seems pretty mandatory. The Maven Memory Game and the Bowels of Infinite Hunger, most precisely. These gems would then be theoretically farmable in maps, adding another step to the character progression through endgame. If the removal of movement skills is a non-negotiable factor of Ruthless with the devs, then I won't play Ruthless in the future. It's that simple for me at this point. I don't want to play the maximize movement speed or your character is bad game that Ruthless currently turns into in maps. This sets up the perfect segue into talking about Flasks. In Ruthless, movement speed flasks, quicksilvers, have had their duration lowered from 6 seconds to 2 seconds. And flasks can no longer gain charges while they are being used. So, theoretically, the Quicksilver Flask would be used only for short bursts of speed rather than having almost full uptime on the flask. I do not think this created the intended effect though, as the meta became to run 2 or even 3 Quicksilver Flasks on rotation to maximize the uptime of movement speed, stealing away the magnificence of Path of Exile's flask system in the process. Now, if you asked the developers what sets Path of Exile the most apart from other games in the genre, I believe they would say something along the lines of itemization or item mods. However, Path of Exile's flask system stands out to me as the pinnacle feature of the game. There are many different ways to gain flask charges, a wide variety of flask types, yielding nearly infinite versatility. Their usefulness depends on how and when you choose to use them, rather than being based on cooldowns. Not to mention, we can use 5 of them at once, and are offered the precision to use them each individually. It is magnificent. Now, in Ruthless, since flask charges cannot be gained while the flask is in use, you should be required to be much more strategic about how and when you use your flasks. But instead of using the variety of flasks in intense situations, players opted to run multiple Quicksilvers to sidestep the flask changes, also relating to the lack of movement skills. What I would do in this situation is give Onslaught its movement speed back, and remove the Quicksilver Flask from Ruthless entirely. I do not mind flasks not filling while is in use, as it puts more weight on your decision making in Ruthless. But for some reason, flasks do not fill when you enter your hideout or in town unless you talk to a specific NPC. This feels like tedium for the sake of tedium, which is neither fun, enjoyable, or desired. I myself cannot find a single way to justify why flasks must be refilled in this way. In the forum post, they say this is to prevent instant heals upon using a portal. When I enter my hideout, I should be healed. Maybe along the campaign of the game, I could see some kind of reasoning for this. But, like, I have a hideout, and there's a portal. It's like, beam me up, Scotty, and you're on the ship. Like, I shouldn't have to talk to an NPC I would rather not even have in my hideout to refill my flasks. I don't like that. My next largest issue with Ruthless is the lack of the 4th Ascendancy and Pantheon. In my opinion, all of the needed changes to player power are achieved by the item scarcity and changes to crafting in Ruthless. Even if all 6 Ascendancy trials in maps were required to access the Eternal Labyrinth, the exponential amount of build viability that comes with it is to be greatly desired. Getting all 6 Ascendancy trials in Ruthless from yellow maps is no small feat. Farming for Ascendancy trials would be something. Anything to break up the long grind from yellow to red maps. I believe Ruthless should present the same potential power as the base game, but more scarcely acquirable. How exactly do you intend on acquiring the Divine Vessels to upgrade a piece of the Pantheon? Of course, it would be as rare as all things are in Ruthless, and there is one Pantheon node that kind of stands out, as it feeds you flask charges to your life flasks. Then maybe something would have to be done about that, or it just wouldn't work while your life flask was in use. While I found leveling through the story a challenging and very rewarding experience, my experience with maps has been a different story. Maps no longer get increases to pack size from the mods rolled on them. This is fine to me, as the pack size of League content seems unchanged, thus making extra content feel much more challenging. What feels really bad is the map drop rate. I quote from the Ruthless forum post. The core Ruthless experience is that you don't have strong enough items to handle the content. I found that my characters would have the ability at times to progress to higher tier content, but not the access to that content where I felt my gear might have been lacking. I had to grind lower maps for literal days. Like, there was a day I spent 8 hours farming yellow maps and had nothing exciting to show for that. All I did was just try and grind my way forward. Even with an Atlas passive tree dedicated to the increased drops of maps, yellow maps are not sustainable. Atlas passives should not be mandatory to be able to progress in Ruthless, which is currently not the case. If you do not spec almost unilaterally for increases to map drops, you will greatly struggle to get into higher tier maps. I believe no Atlas passive should feel mandatory for any content, including the Legion and Incursion duration passives. Uber bosses are an exception, but the Atlas passive tree should be used to tailor your experience to your liking or need, not something you can mess up greatly, hindering your league progression, requiring days of work to fix. All content should be accessible without the need to allocate a single Atlas passive as it is in the base game. Chance orbs can be used to purchase unmaking orbs in Ruthless, so it is much more reasonable to change your Atlas passive tree than your character's passive tree. However, I do not feel chance orbs dropped often enough to guarantee the ability to change the Atlas passive tree as it may be required to do so. And this includes the ability to purchase chance orbs for fusings from the vendor, something I did quite often. The rare item vendor recipes for chance, chaos, and regal orbs have all been removed. I would re-implement this recipe to give chance orbs at all item levels, which means you would have to exchange potential transmutation and alchemy shards for chance orbs. This would also give value in understanding which mods on identified items give alchemy shards as to not use them for the chance orb recipes. And jewelry is also just more rare in general, so it would be fairly difficult to create chance orbs in this way, but it would allow a trade-off to help alleviate the pressure of changing the Atlas passive tree. Divination cards do not drop in any way in Ruthless mode. I am very in favor of this change, but the issue I believe this has caused the most is accessibility of Gem Cutter's Prisms, GCPs. I acquired 11 GCPs in a month of playing. Not even enough to fully quality a single gem or flip my level 20 gems. The vendor recipe to flip a gem from level 20 to level 1 with 20% quality has been removed. So either this recipe should be reinstated to give GCPs the value they deserve at their rarity, or the drop rate of GCPs should be greatly increased. Alternatively, quality gems could drop more frequently since GCPs and gems are so rare, thus increasing the possibility to vendor gems for GCPs or cause you to re-level a gem because a new gem dropped with higher quality. It should be theoretically possible to quality all of your gems in Ruthless. Currently, it would take years in a game with leagues every few months. All league content can only be acquired from the league from which it was introduced, with very few exceptions. This means you can only get fossils from Delve, you can only get breach splinters from Breach, only get catalysts from Metamorphs, and so on. There are different types of additional content. Master missions, which have an extremely low chance to naturally spawn. Content with a set chance to spawn, like essences or harbingers or strongboxes. And lastly, content from a pool to be chosen if content were to be added to your map, like Breach, Abyss, Harvest, and such. These are the pieces of League content that can be blocked. Supposedly, when opening a map, it will determine if there will be additional content in that map. What that content is picked from the pool of additional content. And most Atlas passives with these 10 content types are to increase the likelihood that content spawns relative to other content, rather than a fixed rate like in the base game. It is not quite that simple though. Rogue Exiles, Strongboxes, Shrines, and Tormented Spirits have a natural chance to spawn in maps, while having a set percentage increase on the Atlas passive tree. Somehow, this content spawning in maps can affect the spawn rates of the pooled content types. For reference, I spec'd into chance to spawn Essence, Harbinger, and Strongboxes, in addition to increased chance for Abyss. In turn, I spawned much fewer Abyss nodes than before I added the percentage chance content. This was tested over hundreds of maps. I would say that something is bugged with the content system the devs put into place for Ruthless mode. Content with a set percentage chance to spawn should not be able to take the place of the pooled content spawns. From my testing, the system does not work quite how it is described to. If it did, it would be fairly easy to understand what the Atlas passive investment into additional content is actually doing for you. Now I'm going to dig into each piece of League content specifically, but as it is Sanctum League, and Sanctum was the most present piece of content as I played through Ruthless, I will start there. In the Sanctum League, you would imagine that Sanctum would feel good and give you good rewards like it does in the base game. And then the entire experience of playing Ruthless during Sanctum League should be largely shaped by Sanctum, in my opinion. This is not what we got with Sanctum. At all. Currency rewards have a chance to not spawn at all, and when they do not give anything of great value, as in a single transmutation orb if you complete the floor. Sanctified relics are really rare and cannot be relied on to really add anything of value to your character. This is all not to mention we are already taking on the challenge of doing Sanctum with no movement skills. I enjoyed doing Sanctum and experiencing the new content, but the state of rewards in Ruthless left me feeling like I was doing nothing but wasting my time each time I went into Sanctum. The most sour part of my experience with Ruthless in Sanctum League was Sanctum. And that is just so sad to me. Einhar's beasts no longer give unique items when they are sacrificed in Ruthless. Instead, they can give a set talisman base type that can roll normal, magic, or rare. The likelihood of getting anything useful from these beast crafts is nearly unfathomable. I got one rare talisman out of like 15 red beasts. Beasts can also be used to craft mods onto Flasks, as well as the special beasts existing, so the beast uniques and aspects may still be sought out. There does not seem to be much value to Bestiary outside of those, which is sad given how great the rest of the masters are. If you could turn an amulet into the specified talisman with a beastcraft, it would feel much better. Even then, it is a hard thing to want to do, as attributes are a bit more scarce resource in Ruthless. Tainted oils may be very difficult to obtain, and catalysts cannot be used on talismans. I understand this as a way to keep talismans in the game after removing them from other content, but it feels rather underwhelming in its current state. Incursion is great, because the Incursion temples are so large that they can be one of the best sources of map drops. The Incursion encounters in maps can also provide a lot of items. However, the limited ability of movement, less damage, and less access to chaos resistance can make completing the incursions in maps in the allotted time very difficult. This makes the Atlas passive that gives more time from kills in incursions, time dilation, mandatory to have any chance to complete them. I believe that both in the base game and in Ruthless, the increased time bonus should be a permanent addition to Incursion, and the Atlas passive should only be for the increased chance for magic monsters. Taking steps to slow the game down, as in Ruthless, is great, but some of the in-game timers need to be either removed or adjusted to compensate for the slower pace. It appears that all incursion mods on items have been removed in Ruthless, including from the chests in Tier 3 rooms. The boss still drops uniques, and incursion for the most part feels really good in Ruthless. It is much harder to obtain Sulfite for Delve, but it can be a great source of rewards and experience. You will find Azurite, Flares, and Dynamite more commonly than usual, and fossil rewards seem to only offer a single fossil. You can even find Azurite locked behind blocked walls, making Delve feel a bit more like mining. Azurite can be used to purchase resonators from Nico. The difficulty of Delve is unchanged, so the pack size and stacking of rare enemies can be overwhelming when compared to maps. Delve feels really rewarding, but it is quite difficult. Fossils only come from Delve, so if you want fossils, you have to Delve. I like it this way. It makes the existence of content have more of a purpose to exist in the game. Delve cities can still be a good source of maps, bosses still give their uniques. Delve feels to be in a great spot outside of being swarmed by monsters without phasing or a movement skill. Then there's Betrayal. Syndicate members and safe houses are still a fantastic source of experience, but the Syndicate members no longer dropped veiled items. The safe house rewards have been changed pretty drastically, adding in trap chests in which you pick from a selection of items, which can even have level 100 items, and guff crafting benches in a variety of other locations. Transportation rewards seem like a chest that gives you a single white item of a specified base type and feels really bad. Interventions still give scarabs, though not for the Master Mission content. This is actually one of the areas I do not agree with the gating of content. I don't think scarabs should be locked behind Betrayal content exclusively. I think they should naturally drop as they now do in the base game, as well as the Scarab Strongbox maybe. In the current state of the game, I think scarabs are more of a piece of the base game. It was in the Ruthless announcement that higher tiers of scarabs are needed for higher tiers of maps, yet they are so rare that the system can hardly be engaged with. I have 6 scarabs. Scarabs offer the choice of when you do the specified content, meaning that you want to coordinate when you use them to get the most value out of the Atlas passives relating to that content. There are not the resources to rework your Atlas passive tree to maximize the use of a single scarab. Thus, I don't think they should be as rare. The occasional scarab naturally dropping, or even better, a scarab strongbox would not break the game and allow the scarab system to be something that actually gets used, but this does come from a purely solo self-bound perspective. I also think veiled items should exist as the transportation safe house rewards. Then the veiled mods can still exist in the game and potentially something to farm for while existing in the game in a very similar fashion to influenced items. They would not give the crafts, but a way to acquire items with the veiled crafts on them would be cool, and like all other items, they still have to drop rolled well to have significant value. Kirac missions are harder to obtain than the other master missions, but Kirac can give very valuable Atlas completion and is the best way to get access to unique maps, though the scouting reports are also very rare. Useful maps are one of the most difficult things to acquire in Ruthless, so every Kirac mission is extremely valuable as it also refreshes his inventory with each mission run. You will not have the currency to buy all of the maps, but should be able to manage the ones that you need. Kirac is amazing. Now for the 10 types of what I call pooled content that are the blockable pieces on the Atlas here. Ritual rewards give mostly magic items with small offerings of ritual splinters and a decent helping of the ritual base types, almost one per ritual encountered. Of the many rituals I spawned, only 2 were of the upgraded type with currency unique rewards. Ritual does not offer much outside of the ritual base types, and it does slightly suffer from the reduced pack size in maps. However, with the accessibility of the ritual base types, I would say Ritual feels to be in a decent spot in Ruthless. Blight encounters in maps operate the same way as normal, but the rewards have had their chest designations removed. The chest locations are not shown on the minimap, although each chest in the Blight encounter has a chance to give oils or a blighted map as a reward. Blighted maps, though, are a different story. The chest icons have returned in smaller quantities, offering weapons, armor, jewelry, and currency, but there are no Blight rewards, which I find strange. As likely you would want to invest oils on the blighted map, there is no return on investment in that regard, and also makes me question how it might be possible to acquire tainted oils. The only reason I see for blighted maps currently is to maybe try for blighted uniques, but beyond that, blighted maps, I just have kind of been throwing them in a pile. Delirium, I have not invested into in any way, but I can say Delirium mirrors give almost 1 cluster jewel per Delirium stack, though the meter increases slower. Delirium feels more generous with regard to cluster jewels than the base game, but gives no other rewards aside from Simulacrum Splinters. This feels fair, as you may get the cluster jewels you may be seeking easier, but crafting them to be useful is the real and more appropriate challenge in Ruthless, in my opinion. I find Metamorph to be amazing in Ruthless. Metamorphs give no rewards aside from catalysts. The unique Metamorph pieces that drop after killing a Metamorph also only give catalysts, and it tells you which type of catalyst it gives. If you want catalysts, you do Metamorphs. It's that simple, and I love it, but there is not much value to Metamorphs outside of catalysts. Heist is a wild experience. The transition from the pack size of maps to the unchanged pack size of a heist with large swarms of enemies was shocking by comparison when I first jumped in. Lots of enemies, magic, rare, and unique, swarming you with no movement skills. Without phasing, it is a near death trap. Heist contracts are very difficult, and drops from enemies might be more rewarding than the loot from the chests containing almost nothing but magic items. Big and small chests. However, the big chests behind doors can sometimes drop blueprints. Blueprints are incredible, while being equally difficult without crafted heist gear. Blueprint locked chests have had their reward types returned to them for them to be revealed, but the real reward is in the mixture of alt quality gems and replica uniques, which is the target of every blueprint regardless of its typing. It takes a lot of work to get there, but the gems or uniques can be build enabling, as it was for one of my 3 builds. No trinkets, no rolled gear or experimental bases. I was very satisfied from my experience, but heists will be extremely difficult for lesser experienced players even if we had access to movement skills. Breach I have not invested into at all, but they do not feel much different from normal breaches. The pack size and amount of rare enemies are larger than what you will normally encounter in maps, and can overwhelm you without movement skills. Breach splinters seem to drop a bit less, but with some investment should be in a good spot. Breachstone bosses can still give their unique items, so Breach has good value. Abyss is the content that I have spec'd into the most. Without investment, I never saw an Abyss jewel drop from the chest from the end of the Abyss. But there are passive nodes that increase the chance for an Abyss jewel to drop. Even with the passive nodes, I still have found more Abyss jewels from the Abyssal Depths hordes. Atlas passives can make the pack size of Abyss insane, and increasing the rarity of the troves is very strong. I think similarly to cluster jewels, getting Abyss jewels should not be the issue. The issue should come in finding or creating useful jewels. I believe Abyss jewels should always drop from the chests without passive investment. The roughly 25% chance to drop a Stygian Vise from an Abyssal Depths is not the worst, and I have not encountered a Lich. It is also not possible to find item level 86 Abyss jewels in Ruthless with the changes to the Atlas passive tree. Item level 86 jewels have their own tier of mods, and I believe they should at least be acquirable, even if they must drop off a Lich in an 84 zone. Abyss is one of the worst feeling pieces of content in Ruthless. Expedition I have not done much with because it seems rather bad. Rog may still have the potential for amazing items, but the items offered are mostly magic items. Tujin's offerings are very weak and very expensive. Gwyn is still seemingly the same. You can fish for higher level base types, as well as Danig still offering you the same things. I never got a logbook, so I don't have any information about those. The Harvest reroll crafts have been completely removed, but all of the other crafts still exist. I have found good value from Harvest converting lesser oils into more rare ones to get amulet anointments. Rerolling corrupted maps is also very valuable with Harvest. It takes much longer to build up the life force for the Harvest crafts because the spawn rate of everything is way lower, but there is definitely valuable in targeting Harvest. Legion is the only League content that I was more disappointed with than Abyss, aside from Sanctum. I targeted Legion for a while to get a chance at a timeless jewel. Getting the splinters was not too terrible, but after running 3 2-way legions and a single 3-way legion and not getting a single timeless jewel, I was upset. There are no incubators or rewards on monsters killed in the timeless conflict. In their place is a meter that appears to indicate progress towards a timeless jewel, but increments so slowly that even with an exceptional build in a 4-way, would struggle to cap them. I've been told that timeless jewels can still drop without filling the reward bar, but I have no evidence to prove that. There is such limited access to the ability to reroll timeless jewels that I believe there should be more timeless jewels, not less. I'm talking like a chance each time you kill a boss, potentially dropping you a jewel of that boss type. The same way that cluster jewels drop, and how I also feel abyss jewels should drop. It takes a long time to farm up the timeless emblems. The end of the journey should be rewarding. Legions and maps also suffer from the same timer issue that Incursion does. No incubators from those as well. With lesser character power and movement, it is practically mandatory to have the protracted battle notable passive on the Atlas passive tree to even have a chance to do anything with legions and maps. I really wanted Legion to be good, but it turned out pretty disappointing. Now for the content with set percentage chances to spawn as indicated by the Atlas passive tree. Essences and Harbingers have no natural chance to spawn. Rogue Exiles, Shrines, Strongboxes, and Tormented Spirits have a natural chance to spawn in a map, as well as some map mods, and beyond only via map mods and the Atlas passives. Essences have to be invested in to even have a chance to spawn in maps, and even spawn the lowest tier essences in maps. Essences can also no longer be used on rare items. To use an essence, you must add it to a normal item. In the time I farmed essences, I found very few that were actually decently valuable, with no chances at the corrupted essences. Harbingers are great to add, as they supply exclusively Harbinger currency such as Horizon and Harbinger Orbs to help with Atlas completions. There are no binding shards. I do not believe I saw engineering shards. If you are really lucky, annulment, ancient, or fracturing shards can drop as well, and I don't recall any other shards dropping, including from the couple of beachheads that I ran from using my Harbinger Orbs. Shrines and Tormented Spirits are pretty much the same in the base game. Beyond did drop me a few tainted currencies, but I did not target it enough to get a chance at a corrupted 6-link or anything. Rogue Exiles stand out in particular at being the most underwhelming piece of content in Ruthless, almost exclusively dropping a stack of normal items with maybe 1 or 2 magic items. There are no Vaal side areas in Ruthless, and the only way I have encountered to get sacrifice fragments to get to Atziri came from the Vaults of Atziri unique map, both times only giving me a single sacrifice fragment rather than the 8 fragments and mixture of Vaal gems you get in the base game. It is possible to spawn Atziri in Incursion temples, but as far as accessing the actual Atziri fight, I do not know of a reliable way to set out doing so. Corrupted maps do not drop sacrifice fragments, and instead drop Vaal orbs at about the rate you would expect to see sacrifice fragments drop off of the bosses in the base game. This also allows you a way to target Vaal orbs should you require them, and they are required for Atlas progression, so it is nice that Vaal orbs are in the game in a farmable way by doing corrupted maps. Similar to Atziri, all in-game bosses still have their guaranteed unique item drops, but they are much, much harder to access. It is hard enough to make it to red maps, but then Eater and Exarch require 50 T14 plus maps for each boss attempt. I finally managed to take down the quest versions of Eater and Exarch on my 30th day playing, over 250 hours into the league, though I did reroll several times. But that's a lot of time investment just to get to like the premier quest bosses in the game currently. Getting those watchstones may make the Atlas passive tree a bit more flexible, allowing more access to the higher tier maps and in-game bosses, but just getting a couple T16 maps to spawn the initial bosses was its own test of patience. And with that, I think I have brushed over nearly everything in the game as it exists from the initial launch of the Ruthless game mode. In conclusion, Ruthless provides a wildly unique experience of Path of Exile. Ruthless is great for experienced players who want a more meaningful progression through the game, as well as for newer players overwhelmed by the amount of content and choices thrown at them. However, I would not say that I recommend diving deep into the in-game in Ruthless mode in its current state. Lack of movement skills mean that your build's clear speed is almost more dictated by your movement speed than your damage. Progressing the Atlas is a colossal task, and a lot of the League content still needs tweaking to truly provide a fulfilling experience in the endgame that is worth your time to engage with. I do not know if my vision for what I hope Ruthless to be matches that of the developers, but I do hope to see the game mode continue to improve and future League content fits into Ruthless in a more properly rewarding way than Sanctum did. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. And that is all I have for this one. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the like button as it really helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss more videos from me. If you'd like to help support my channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon just below the video, or by joining to become a member. And I will see you all in the next one. Cheers.